have always joked about the absent-minded professor for centuries. When it starts happening to regular people on a daily basis, let's say, then it starts ringing the alarm bells. There are many neurological disorders that can cause different kinds of problems, like early detection and diagnosis becomes a critical factor for doctors treating such cases. Now, think of combining that with the latest artificial intelligence and machine learning technologies that can help doctors better understand the brain and find out the effects of different conditions and the capability, most importantly, of predicting those symptoms early, like the early onset of symptoms. That is mind blowing, isn't it? Viewers, today we have our guest today is from In-Med Prognostics, which does exactly these kind of amazing things. And help me welcome Mr. Rajesh Purushottam, co-founder and CEO of In-Med Prognostics, a company in Pune. Welcome to the show, Mr. Rajesh.
Thank you very much, Ram. Really appreciate you kind of finding me out and believing in this endeavor. And this is something I'm really humbled with this invitation and want to do my best.
Thank you so much for agreeing to share your insights, Rajesh. As the format of the 3, 2, 1 Live Limitless goes, I'll be asking Rajesh three very critical questions, and also he'll be sharing two pieces of advice. And finally, I will ask him to share a key resource that you can start using today. So let's start with the first question, Rajesh, coming your way. What has been the journey so far for you? And especially, my question is like, why medtech of all the other things that you could have done? Why medtech and your quick journey, please?
Sure. Thank you, Ram, very much. Started my career as an engineer MBA in the shop floor in an engineering company, and then moved into human resources as a career. And a chance, meeting with a leading doctor in 2005, 2007 got me into telemedicine. And I did an assignment for him, which took me to the US and India. And that's when I got a first flavor of technology, because this field was in a specific area called as teleradiology. And then I came back to the corporate, and in 2013 set up my first teleradiology services company, which means that we provide uh, prelim reports to US hospitals and doctors, where when it is day here and night there. So the Indian radiologists report these cases as a preliminary report, and then in the morning the US radiologist finalizes the report, because of which you're able to leverage the time zone. And of course it is technology, so there is a turnaround time, and these are all ambulatory care cases, which means that a patient is actually in that golden hour,
Mhm.
because of which you need to provide the service. So I got this as a first, being an outsider and coming into this, and I realized that wow, technology can kind of really make things happen, specifically digital health. And this led me to kind of start my first venture. And I found that while the service model is good, it was also kind of not throwing those kind of challenges, because then there's only so much you can do. It's more of the same. And in 2018, I uh, came across this artificial intelligence radiology, and specifically using MRI images. And I really looked at brain as the last frontier before we find aliens in space. And uh, the governments, the whole world, pharmaceutical companies, everybody want to understand the brain, because finally we have realized that brain is what keeps you alive. And we have seen also, and with the kind of longevity and the, the uh, good medications, good way, or I mean, ease of life has basically extended the age, the average living to 80. It's now, you will see very soon, what was 60 is now moving, and 60 is the new 40. So what we saw that from a mental wellness perspective, mental health, it's undiscovered. And it is going to be the next big thing from a revolution perspective, because society and governments also want that senior citizens also find meaningful way of engaging themselves and also contributing. The classic case is IIT professors retirement age 5 years back was moved from 60 to 65, and they're planning to move it to 70. If you are from the US, so you see in the US, you go to a store, you will find an 80-year-old salesman, you'll find a 75-year-old salesman, because The idea is to keep yourself active. The brain needs to be active. If the brain is not active, then where all the problems start. So we want to be looking at medtech with a lot of empathy from a B to C perspective. We don't want to just do it at a B2B level. We want to see how digital health or digital therapeutics can kind of impact the end user, and they are able to then provide feedback and also to kind of confirm whether the medtech impact is for real or no.
Absolutely, absolutely. This the kind of technology that is being developed, and during the last 20 years, let's say,
Sure,
everything has changed.
correct.
Whatever we used to do in the traditional ways, everything has changed. The way we go out, the way we order food.
Order
Now,
food,
today, press a
exactly.
button, food comes to your door. Like
Sure,
20 years ago, nobody would have thought this could have happened. It was all like fictional,
correct.
hi-fi, sci-fi movies. Now
Sci-fi
the
movie.
movies
Yeah,
are getting real. Anyway,
correct.
so what are my, and let me go to my next question. Like, what are the, I'm sure you have faced some challenges in, scaling up globally, especially by Indian startup. And what are your
Correct.
insights on making it, like we are all talking about the unicorn from India? Like, what are your insights on that?
Fantastic. See, I always wanted to, my co-founders are Americans. Okay. And Dr. Lata Punamali she's a professor in social research. She's a social scientist from Case Western, Ohio. And Al Curran, her husband, is our CTO, and he's a PhD from Stanford in image processing. So, one thing's for sure, I realized that you need to have a global mindset when you're looking at technology. Because while you might have something which is global and scalable everywhere in the world, and it's not only India, the localization becomes a challenge. And when you look at localization means you need to understand the psychosocial, the legalities, norms, availability of data, behavioral responses, mindset, attitude. So all this has to be part of the offering. One can't just only look at the technical component or the opportunistic component, which is, oh, there is a market size, addressable market, and these are the four P's. It's not that simple. Although the technology scaling is simpler because everybody, for example, uses AWS globally. Okay, so AWS does it for you. You don't need to run a data center. You just need to rent it. Okay, so you have HubSpot as a CRM. You have G Suite. You have Google Docs, Zoom. So that part is good. Now the whole thing is, where is the innovation? The innovation is in terms of is understanding the endpoints in that market. So in this particular case in mental health, we understood what are some of the endpoints that are grappling India. Okay. Now, if you look at the comorbidity, thanks to COVID, everybody knows this word. So a high diabetic is a very good chance of a Alzheimer patient.
Mhm.
Okay. And type 3 diabetes is Alzheimer's. Okay. So the lifestyle, can contribute the lifestyle can predict in on mental health. A classic case, we had a recent case of Saurav Ganguly, who is a BCCI president. Now he's an ex-cricketer. He's healthy, but he had a massive heart attack, and he was saved in time. You had Remo Fernandez, who's a leading choreographer in Bollywood. He's only dancing and jumping, and he had a very bad heart attack. Now,
Yeah.
why is this? Now, that's a very interesting question. Now, they must be doing all their annual health checkups. They have all doctors at their doorstep at a beck and call. But what happened is lifestyle and stress. So, welcome, gentlemen. It's lifestyle and stress, ladies and gentlemen, that it is lifestyle and stress, which is the new killer. Same thing happening in Japan, same thing happening in China, same thing happening in Korea. 16 hours burning the midnight oil, lack of sleep, lack of quality of sleep. Earlier, if you remember, to 25, 30 years back, one would hit the sack at max 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
Okay, 9:30, because we had to go to school early. Anyway, there was just one program on TV. Life was good, very simple. What happened? The quality of life was there. Quality of relationships was there. Okay, today what it is, we are into social media. We don't have a digital sunset. Okay, we'll go right through, and you know that even you, when you use a digital phone just before you go to sleep, you're not going to be sleeping for the next 2 hours because your mind is still processing the data which you last read. So you're going to sleep only at 12, okay, or later than that, and that means you'll start your sleep somewhere at 1:30, and what time you'll have to wake up is about 6 because the world starts by then. So what's happening is that one needs to understand the disorders which are happening in the current market and what are some of the digital interventions that one can do also in terms of onboarding these people. So we have three buckets in mental health called as healthy, suspect, and affected. Now, the focus of medical institutions is on suspect to affected because they come with some history, headache, migraine, or they come with a caregiver comes with some kind of complaints that he's not speaking much or he's violent or blah, blah, blah. But the reality is that you need to check them when they're healthy. And this is what we do a lot of corporate workshops. We do community workshops where we basically talk about graceful aging. We talk about things that you need to be aware of because aging starts after 35. A lot of people thought aging starts after 55. So
Mm,
you need to build muscles. You need to basically build a certain positivity, which is there in your collective unconscious. As you keep aging, because the fact is there's going to be a lot of changes around you. There's going to be a lot of VUCA. So while there's volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, where is the self in this whole scheme of things? One could be material pursuit. And I'm going to be suggesting a book which where I found a lot of meaning to kind of declutter if at all you want to keep your sanity and maintain a certain equanimity and well-being.
fantastic. Fantastic. I totally agree. Which brings us to the third question that I wanted to ask you, like, what makes your product uh, and the startup, like your startup, different, and how do you see the ecosystem evolving as we speak?
Very good. Thanks, Ram, for this because very, very nice question. See, one of the things in mental health was always it used intuitive medicine in the sense that it was intuitive sense of the caregiver, okay, or the sponsor or the family member saying that yeah something is wrong and we need to. And then the doctor also uses a lot of intuitive medicine because he's got his years of practice. He could be from a renowned psychiatry or he could be from a renowned uh, a brain research kind of a background or a leading faculty. But the route is normally through the family physician. The route is normally through the MD consultant in India. And many times they themselves are not geared to kind of refer the patient upwards. So many times they kind of limit it there itself and saying that you can go back home, they will write some kind of medication, something on sleep. Most of the time it is either sleep or headache. That's why we call it a headache and migraine market. We as a startup and as a solution wanted to bring evidence-based medicine like in the West. Okay, so there are certain assessments that we have brought, for example, psychological assessment. So these are pen and paper. For example, there's a test called loneliness test, which we have introduced. There's a test called happiness test. So we look at a positive psychology point of view. We don't look at it from a negative psychology. Okay. Now, when the patient fills it up, you and these scores and these tests have certain validity. They have gone through that complete validation before they administered. Of course, they are not the most accurate. They have their level of accuracy, but at least it's a good starting point from an evidence-based perspective. Then what we have brought in is this whole new concept of looking at voxel-based morphometry, which means that when you need an MRI, so from the paper pencil test, from the score, and from the clinical examination by a neurophysician, he can order an MRI exam. And this is very popular in the West, called as volumetric MRI, which means that they look at the structures of the brain from a morphological changes point of view. So there are we have 45 structures in the brain, but the six structures are very, very key, which means that we have the most important is the hippocampus, the cerebellum, amygdala, we have the midbrain, pons. So these are some of these structures where if the changes in the structure is less for that healthy range, for that covariate of age and gender, okay, because it's like how a credit manager compares a credit score. So he knows what is a good score and what is not a good score. So we quantify these structures and we have brought in a micro ethnic reference range for the Indian market. So
Mhm.
Indian brains are 30% lesser than Caucasian brains. And the Koreans and the Japanese brains are even smaller. Okay, so the brain sizes differ based on ethnicity. And we have defined the ethnicity, we've defined the micro ranges. And then we give a percentile, whether it is a 25th, 50th, or the 75th percentile vis-a-vis the healthy brain. So vis-a-vis healthy brain, where does this put? So we use AI and deep learning based on this MRI images, it is uploaded, and this goes as a quantified report, a quantification report, along with the normal MRI, and this provides evidence. And also, the physician can order a study maybe 6 months and see the longitudinal flavor between time series 1 and time series 2, and say that the brain has been shrinking, because after 35 the brain starts shrinking, 40, sorry, after 40 the brain starts shrinking. So that is what called atrophy. Now there is a healthy atrophy for between 40 to 50, 50 to 60, 70 to 80. Now if the atrophy is accelerating, that means there is a high predictability, because we are here to give analysis and not diagnosis, because the diagnosis has to come from the neurophysician because they are trained for it. However, the evidence or the digital assistant that we provide creates a certain sense of quality in the medical decision making, which enables the neurophysician, sorry, which enables the caregiver and the patient also to be on the same page. Because one of the things what we also see rising, specifically in India, is a lot of mistrust between the physician and the patient and the caregiver due to intuitive medicine. But evidence-based medicine, like in the US, which is driven by the payer, because payers are very logical. They say, you will have to tell me, why did you have this referral? What's the CPT code? What's the ICD code? Give me the medical summary. Because of which there is a clear basis for an investigation or change in the treatment plan.
Got it. So this is like, in layman's words, investigating the diseases on steroids. Like it's like full of power and accurate and evidence-based, and comes with numbers, like to show.
It comes with numbers, pattern. So basically, you understand organ geometry and pattern recognition. So just treat the body like a machine.
It is.
So this machine is like the wear and tear
like
of this machine, and the mean time between failure, we call it. There is a bathtub curve which says, when is the next time it is likely to fail? That's all you need.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So that is the reason why we use the word prognosis. So we are saying we want to be AI and deep learning will happen in prognosis or prognostician rather than look at diagnosis.
Got it. So before it happens.
Before it happens. So you study a lot of the past data to kind of deliver it in the present with a predictability of the future.
Awesome. So that's what
doctors particularly need it, because what happens is, don't get me wrong, they are smart. They have a good hunch about it, but sometimes they just want to have some data to convince the patient. Because one of the things very important, Ram, you should know in mental health is there's a lot of treatment abandonment unilaterally, both by the patient and the caregiver. They just decide one day that they are not going to have these medicines.
Correct. I know.
So you need them to come back and do a follow-up. Yeah. And in psychiatry and mental health is very difficult. But some of these new devices that we are coming up with will help them to have these follow-ups. So it's a way to get them back to find out whether they are staying the pathway, the treatment pathway.
Totally understand. Totally. Very interesting. Like you, thank you for sharing all these very intricate things that are happening. Some of them are mind-boggling, getting technology to assist how to read the mind and the brain that goes. It's a very complex field, and I'm sure that you are trying to make it as simple as possible.
Yeah, exactly. Very absolutely. Try to simplify it, because we need to simplify it for the caregiver, because he or she and the sponsor, the caregiver could be the sponsor, there could be a sponsor. So we even studied that behaviorally, what happens at home of actually making care available, making diagnosis available, and everything is there. So if you don't move them, if they find it too complex, they're not going to be on board.
I got it. So what would be your two pieces of advice? You just answered 3 questions. Thank you so much. Well, my next part of this interview is going to be to ask you to share 2 pieces of advice for our viewers today.
Yes. First and foremost is what I see is that one should looking at the life beyond just the stages. We used to have the adolescent, teenage, young adult, and we were fairly compartmentalized. So one of my advice is, be it an entrepreneur, be it a leader, be it a corporate executive, is to look at that life is like a bucket list. So at some point in time, whether at 40, you want to do it at 30, or if you come out with a bucket list, and bucket list as a concept came from people who were terminally ill in palliative care, specifically in cancer. And today, there are a lot of regular people adopting it and saying that, what are the 100 things I want to do in my lifetime before I die? Or what is my epitaph going to look like? And how is it? What is that I'm going to leave behind? And people are adopting it very positively. And I find it very, very interesting in today's times that people at 60 have changed their careers and got into something totally different because they were off the responsibilities what they had, specifically in India. They delivered whatever they had to deliver, and now they are looking at a second career and pursuing their hobbies. And so that is one advice is, I would say, follow your passion. At the same time, understand your employability.
Hmm.
Means what you might be passionate might not be remunerative or rewarding. However,
Absolutely.
you have to look at your employability and that what can be traded because of your skill set or your. Now, in the whole process, at some point in time, you can converge your passion with your employability or your billability. That is, you are able to deliver something which kind of gives you an economic return, which is absolutely important to fund all these, passionate dreams and hobbies that you need to have. That's one advice. Second is to, in today's world, is to understand your mind like never before. And I use a word called what I see around, and specifically the political environment, is a fall of intellect. Uh, and what the earlier generation and the earlier, the wise men, the wisdom, whether you call it Winston Churchill, Abraham Lincoln, they did not have great lot of access to a lot of resources. What they had was inspiration. What they had was intellect. And I see that missing.
Mhm.
And one of the things is that don't look forward to leaders to have it. You will have to develop it yourself. And you have to analyze what is being said from an intellect standpoint.
Exactly.
And I myself have been pursuing that as a education and trying to find where I can find it along with the other pursuits. Technology has got better, life is faster, a lot of conveniences at your doorstep. However, intellect is something which you need to pursue and you need to ask yourself whether you have it or not.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much for that's a very interesting perspective, I must admit. Um, and finally, we are at the end of this session. So I would like to ask you to share. Is there a resource or some kind of a key resource that you want the viewers to take away today?
Yeah, very interesting. And I want to quote a film that I recently saw, and very interesting is Our Friend. The name of the movie is Our Friend,
Mhm.
just released about 2 months back, almost a month back, I think. Yeah, it's about it's a Hollywood film which talks about a gentleman who writes about the entire experience on a magazine, in a US magazine, about his wife's death from cancer. And while she's passing away, a high school friend of his, of her high school friend, and now his friend, because they were socially connected after she got married to him. And this friend joins in the most difficult time of their lives before she passes away. So
Hmm.
he leaves his job in New Orleans and he comes over to stay with them. And he basically says that, look, I want to be with you and her because they are all friends, and want to be there, saying that while because they have two daughters, so he's saying while you'll be busy with managing her at home, I'll take care of the daughters, I'll take care of the home. So he does the groceries, he's there like a psychological infrastructure. So he
Mhm.
provides till her death.
Oh,
In the US, how you have the hospice who comes, in the last stage, there's a lot of cleaning. And he's also there for this man uh, at the time when it is the most difficult phase, and he has nothing to gain.
hmm.
He
I
has nothing to
think
gain. And that's the reason the title of the movie is Our Friend.
perfect.
So this friend, so you just wonder, like, is he a ex-boyfriend? What's his motive? Is there something he needs? Because that's the world we live in.
Exactly.
But there is somebody who can just come and saying that, look, I want to be there with you. And if we as a viewer, as a third person seeing it, you will just say that absolutely. And it's a true story. It's a true story.
Oh, good.
So it leaves an impact, and that's exactly what I was connecting with intellect. that what we need is more of that. We don't need more Swiggies, and we don't need more conveniences. We need to walk, we need to run, we need to, not just because there is so much of commerce which will make us lazy in our, make us stay in our couches and stop making us feel and live. I think it's time we are able to, because I come from medtech, I'm saying there's a line you need to draw where technology leaves at your doorstep or leaves at a certain place, and then you need to come back to a humanized system.
Awesome,
Is what I would
amazing,
believe it.
amazing, amazing. So the movie is called Our Friend.
Our friend
Our Friend. So it's,
Dakota Johnson. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
truly, truly living the phrase, the old phrase, a friend in need is friend indeed. So that's
absolutely
and
really.
it's
I
a,
mean, you see it in a Hollywood movie. You've seen the stories in
yeah,
India. Like Sholay. Jay Viru. It's
correct.
always. But when you see this, and when you see a Hollywood film really putting it into perspective, and you really feel that while it's an individualistic society, everybody has your own me time and privacy and space. But what do? You also need another human to fill that space, and that too in the most difficult time. And he's making it easier. It's very relatable for anybody who sees it.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Rajesh, and thank you for sharing your insights and your perspectives, and also the key piece of advice and a wonderful resource for all of us to take back and take away and explore more. And thank you once again for your time at this busy schedule. During this busy schedule, you took some time away from your work and your schedule to share a few insights with us. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, Ram. Indeed,
Thank you.
keep doing the good work. And entrepreneurs like us also get a voice, and really appreciate the endeavor that you're doing, and to reaching out startups like us who are wanting to make a difference.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank
Bye
you.
bye.